welcome to Suffolk Public Library's Get Creative at Home. For the month of October, we are doing collages. We'll be working with mixed media collages. This is a great one for any age group or skill level. This is one that really the whole family can get into. There are supply kits available if you requested one, but this is also something that's pretty easy. You can find a bunch of magazines in the thrift store. You can make your own materials. There's a lot of options for you to get into this, and let's go ahead and get started. So we have a lot of supplies here in front of us. We have a bunch of different magazines, book pages, even a little piece of paper that my colleague self-marbled. So a bunch of these options will be in your kit if you decide to go with a supply kit from Suffolk Public Library. Otherwise, they're very easy to find on your own. So one of the first steps is you're going to be looking for items that you want. So you're just flipping through and just kind of seeing what you see. Maybe something big, like a big landscape, could give you something to work with, or use small elements as well. I recommend, as you're flipping through, looking for something that can be a subject, something that can be large and imposing, just like the ship. It'll really dominate your composition, and it'll give you a focal point. You can also look for things that have very interesting textures, or things that can be smaller elements as well. Here you can grab figures, and as you're flipping through, as you're kind of considering your options, go ahead and just rip out the pages that really speak to you. Even if you're not sure whether you're going to use them or not, you can always return to them, and it helps to have just like a stack that you're kind of considering or thinking about and seeing what trends emerge. You might see some colors that are consistent that you really like. There might be some shapes that you really like. Something like this is really, really cool. There's a lot of texture going on. It's pretty busy, so you could cut it out into smaller pieces, or you could use it individually. This is also a pretty colorful piece, so maybe you're looking for something that has one of these colors that can be a consistent through line as you're kind of pulling different things together. But this could be like a very, very fun piece or image to play around with if you wanted to. Yeah, like this purplish color here could be something that you find in some other element somewhere else and use to juxtapose. The other option is, because this is so colorful, going with something that's like black and white in contrast, and it really can highlight what you've got. Yeah, so just kind of flip through, just start off flipping through pretty quickly, and you never know what you're gonna find. You might go through and find only one or two things, and the person next to you could really, really like that one magazine. And then as you're starting to flip through things, just rip them out, set them to the side. You might find some consistencies, or it might lead you in a particular direction. Think about having a consistency or at least continuity in colors, lines, shapes, forms, or textures, and take a look. You might only want a small element from something, or you might want to use more of the background of a different piece. So the first thing is just going to be looking at a lot and playing around, seeing what you find, and kind of setting those all to the side for getting to put them together later. So when you've found your elements, or at least elements that you think you're happy with, it's time to get started. And when you're looking at your kit that you get from us, you're going to get a blank piece of paper. We're using watercolor paper because it'll be thick enough to hold up to layering things on top of it. You don't necessarily need to use watercolor paper specifically, but at the very least like a cardstock or something that's got some weight to it. You're also going to get in your kit a glue stick and some book pages, some magazines, things like that. We aren't going to provide you with scissors or an X-Acto knife, so this will be something that you'll want to have on hand when you're getting ready for this. It's up to you with which one you want to use, an X-Acto knife or scissors, or frankly you can tear with your hands and you can get a lot done. This is a reminder you can make your own collage materials. This is a piece that my coworker made doing water marbling on just a blank piece of paper and got a really cool texture, very cool pattern. This would make a really great planet or maybe a sky of some sort in a like very cool surreal thing. So you're not limited to what you're going to get. You have so many options in front of you and available to you. So the world is very much your oyster. So let's talk a bit about composition, just as we're getting started. Having a little bit of an idea of composition is really going to help you as you get started, and it'll look a little bit more cohesive when you finish putting everything together. Like I said, there are a few things that I ended up looking at, sort of the texture between these leaves and the flowers and these feathers, some of like a consistent color palette with like the very warm tones, kind of oranges and yellows. I found this arch in this very natural landscape, which I felt like was going to be a really great focal point, and I was going to kind of use some of these around it to play around with some of those textures and give it some kind of layered effect. The arch is going to make it really fun. I'm thinking it'll be kind of like a portal, and something that has that natural shape to it is a great place to start as you're looking for elements that you want to use. So let's get some space here, and I've got my pencil because I'm roughly going to line up my rule of thirds, which, if you're not familiar, it's more of a photography term, but it works for general composition as well. I'm going to sketch it out on my paper pretty roughly, but in general, if you think of both the horizontal and the vertical pieces of your paper being divided into 3 parts, and then along these lines are going to be where you'll want to put your centerpieces, your focal pieces, and especially on some of these intersecting points. It really helps you get balance in your composition. Of course, if you have a little bit more experience, you don't have to, but this is a great place to start. When you're learning rules, you're not quite ready to break them. So I'm going to line up one of these columns on my arch with that 1/3 line to the side and try to give myself some space. And I'm thinking taking up roughly the lower third with these flowers pieces and kind of taking options, layering. And what we're doing first is I haven't cut anything out, or not too much out yet, and I just kind of want to get a sense of how these things look together and as a cohesive piece, even though we don't quite have the full, we don't quite have everything cut out yet. This is a great way for you to play around. I might use these feathers later, I haven't fully decided. The great thing about collage is that you can really play around with it for a little while. Nothing is done until it's done, and I recommend playing around and layering things while nothing is glued down yet, so you can play around with all of your options before you're committing to anything. So as you're putting all of your pieces together, I'm going to kind of speed through this, but remember your rule of thirds, you're lining up, and trim everything that you need. In this case, I probably will get rid of some of this extra background. You can do it with scissors, or I think tearing tends to be really great for natural items, either a natural landscape or like the flowers that I also have. It really emphasizes that natural texture in a really nice way. So you can cut, you can tear, you can use your X-Acto knife. All of these are opportunities for you, and you can mix them in the same piece. Just play around, line up what you have, see how it looks, making it into smaller pieces, cutting it pretty close to the size that you want. I've got these 2 hummingbirds in this one piece. I want to try and use both of them. Only one is really lined up so that I can use it within the arch like I'm thinking, but I might end up just cutting out that second hummingbird and using him in the foreground instead of just through the arch. You can do a little bit of planning, lay your pieces in place, trim what you need to trim so that you have it a little bit more easily accessible, a little bit more handy to have on you. And it's a long process of layering, unlayering. Remember, collage is all about the context from which things are coming from, and then it's the process and the art form of recontextualizing them. It's putting them in this new space and in conversation with different elements that they originally might not have been part of. So that's really what you're bringing to it, is your vision and your ability to connect things to each other that they might not have originally been connected to. So as you're cutting small elements, especially when you really want them to look natural, go very, very slow and cut kind of within the lines. Don't necessarily go right on the line or on the outside of the lines. This will really help your pieces, your small elements or your sharp elements fit into their new location. As we were talking about that kind of context and context, it will help them fit into the new space and look a little bit more natural when they do it. They won't have any kind of accidental border around them. Be aware, little pieces can be the fiddliest to work with as you're handling them, and place them somewhere that they're not going to get too lost. I think I'm gonna decide to not use this. This space is already pretty cluttered, pretty textured. So yeah, as you're working with it, scooch things around, see how you like it, and then move on to gluing things. Nothing is set in stone until you're done gluing. Now that you're ready to actually start gluing things down, you'll grab your glue stick, you'll grab your sheet of paper, make sure that you have all of your elements that you want kind of laid out in front of you, and that you know where you want them to go. If you have your big anchor piece like I do, getting those lined up so that you know where your furthest back layer, your most, the one that's going directly onto your paper. So go ahead, give it a lot of glue, don't be afraid of it. We're going to do our glue stick, so it will still be a little bit malleable. We're not necessarily, it's not immediately adhered permanently, so we have a little bit of room to wiggle around and smooth it as you go too. Sometimes a glue stick can leave extra little bumps, but it tends to not warp the pages quite as much as like a liquid glue would. So go through, add plenty, don't be afraid of it, and you can always smooth things out. The glue stick should work pretty well for any of the magazine pages, any of the more rough textured, like a normal piece of paper or our book pages. But if you do have a different material that you're using, feel free to test it first with the adhesive that you want to use, just to make sure that you're not going to get any of that weird bubbling or warping or anything like that, that you're happy with the way that it's going to lay down. You can test that on a piece of that paper that you really don't care as much about. You're not worrying about whether it looks good if it's just a bit of the text versus an image that you really, really enjoy. And go ahead and get things smoothed out. Work from the furthest back layer to the one in the foreground. You can trim things as you need to, do what you need to. I think I'm probably going to have to do something different with this grass situation. I like it being a different, not being constrained to this little white border that I have on the paper, but I'll see. We'll see how it goes. Just gluing everything down. Like I said, collage is kind of the recontextualization of everything, and it's very fun. It's great to do with kids, but to get the most cohesive collage, sometimes you are paying attention to some of these more specific things. The balance, am I filling in all of my spaces, things like that. don't be afraid to layer things, trim them once they're on the page, that way you know exactly where they are. You can have things extend past your backing page if you want. That's entirely up to you. But make sure that all of the parts of all of your pieces are laid down, especially if there are any tall or thin elements, making sure that your corners and your edges are really glued down well, and smoothing them out as much as you can each layer. And then we're also going to, at the very end, smooth the whole thing out and really compress our layers and get our layers to really adhere to each other. So just trimming off that little edge there. And then all I really have left is my tiny hummingbird. So the tiny pieces can be very, very fiddly, and those are ones that you don't really want to move around too much once you have glue on them and once you have them in place, mostly because they can be really delicate. They can tear pretty easily. So giving them just a bit of glue and then setting them down and not pressing them down too hard when you have the first set. That way you still have a little bit of malleability, and then just pressing down after that point, just so that you can get it in place and it's not gonna pull itself up from the paper and fly away. So now that it's all in place, I've got my sort of 3 rule of thirds thing going on. I'm really pretty happy with the composition. I'm gonna erase these lines, I drew them as guidelines. You absolutely don't have to. If it's helpful for you, go for it. I'm just gonna erase these because I don't want them in the final piece. These are really just more or less a sketch to remember what I was doing and where I was placing things. And then I'll be pretty much finished. So now that you're all finished, you're all happy with it, what's helpful is to kind of do one last final press if you have parchment paper, or you can even just use the rest of a magazine or something to place down and give it a really good press over the whole piece, either with a rolling pin. I'm just doing it here with my hands. If you have a credit card or something to smooth out, that works as well, but really to just adhere all of our layers and really get it to stick. So here we are, we're all finished. Thank you so much for joining me for Suffolk Public Library's Get Creative for October, where this has been so much fun. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy and want to make more. Thank you for getting creative with us, and remember, if you requested a supply kit, we have those available at our library locations, and we will see you next time.